My name is Karin Valez, and my husband Arsenio and I own Wolfe Creek Family Farm. We are a 40-acre market farm in Peculiar, Missouri. That's west central Missouri. We started, this is our 16th season, serving a 75-member CSA, in addition to market sales and growing for donation to our local food banks. We started on a 5-acre homestead, and my half-acre garden, and decided that we really liked feeding people. And so we tried to figure out how we could turn it into a business. And here we are 16 years later, and this is what we do. This is our thing. We've looked a lot at diversification, probably much more so as a result of the pandemic. That was our first kind of kick into diversifying more. You know, for the majority of the lifespan of this farm, it was, you know, CSA was probably 50%, and then, you know, market sales was 50%. And as soon as we saw that markets weren't going to open, you know, we had to kind of figure out, we've got to figure out something else here. So online sales became a thing. Home delivery became a thing. I started doing garden consulting as a thing, you know, and trying to teach other people how to grow their own food. In addition to that being another stream of income, it's also a way to get other people involved in some way, shape, or form with understanding where their food is coming from and growing their own, and also understanding that it's not super easy and that not everybody is equipped to be able to do it on a larger scale. But that there are people out there that are doing it on a larger scale and, you know, doing it in a way that is kind of working with nature and not against it. So we've done some preserving, we've done jams and jellies, we've done, you know, taking some of the herbs and turning them into teas and spice blends to give ourselves different options to be able to utilize what we're growing and what is available to us, and presenting it in a different way to customers is just one way that we're sort of diversifying. And the next step is agritourism. You know, so if we can have all of those different ways that we are still farming and we are still working with agriculture, but also, you know, sort of mitigating some of the things that we don't have control over. You know, if we can't grow as much in the way of crops, maybe we can bring people out as a revenue stream and introduce them to what it is that we're doing and use that as an alternative to fill in the gaps. That was actually post-pandemic. It was as a result of getting my horticulture degree and going, well, now what do I do with it? You know, I originally did that to help our farm business, but as I was going through that, I realized that there was so much power in food and for people understanding where their food came from, that I thought, okay, well, how can I help people figure out how to grow their own? And one of the things that we talk about is climate change, and we talk about growing food in ways that don't require synthetic inputs, and that you can do it in a small garden space. And I think spreading the word about that is important, and doing a podcast is an easy way to kind of get that message out there and to let people know, yeah, you can be resilient in the face of what is happening with the climate. You can grow some of your own food to add to it, to help with your own food insecurity as things continue to change, regardless of the size space that you have. I don't care if you just have a sunny windowsill. You know, you can grow something of your own that you can put on your own plate, and there's a sense of empowerment that goes along with that. And I think that that's becoming increasingly more and more important as the climate continues to shift.
Ruggieri, Fair Share Farm here. Rebecca Graff and I, we've been farming this land since 2003, and we had a CSA for 18 years, Community Supported Agriculture. It was a participatory CSA where our members would come out and help us harvest and have that kind of be a work requirement. So that was a model we picked up in the Northeast, which is where we met on a CSA farm. I was an environmental engineer before that, so this is kind of for me, more of a real life extension of environmental engineering. Natural systems, it's just all indivisible, and being able to look at the live culture, I feel, has really helped us, at least it's helped me. I always felt, it's all the same thing, and now with the science we know, it's harder and harder to grow a lot of crops 20 different things at a time, not really being in bottom land that's perfect vegetable ground. And like I said, really heavy rains. In 2015, we had 35 inches of rain in 70 days. And so be prepared for an experience like that. That's a big reason we did the berms and swales. And then drought, we have our irrigation system. We use shade cloth a lot more now than we used to. A lot of it's to help with summer germination of like carrots and beets, and we put it over crops in the spring when it's gotten really hot. Need it for the sheep. So too hot, too wet, too cold is, we just use row cover. There's a question about, people have asked us, do you have to plant earlier? And it's like, it's just still always a crapshoot in the spring. It could be warm and then it could get cold again. So you really can't say that things just are warming up earlier. You still have to be careful in the spring. I think we feel we've got a good base now. I think we feel comfortable with the recontouring of the land that we've done and cutting back on the number of crops that we're growing and focusing on just growing for ourselves, for our value-added products. So I think we're happy with that being a path, but just have to keep up with everything, Might have to grow more, put more shade up, who knows, or dig another pond. It's hard to say. And then in 2010, we were able to double the number of solar panels we had through the stimulus bill. And so that's helped a lot. It's provided twice the power, so we get better pressure when we pump it all the way like up to this part of the farm. It's nice, we feel we've made advancements, and the more diversified you are, if one thing goes bad, hopefully it's not the end of the whole thing. So diversity is what helps a lot. So I think this is good. It showed, this is from 2002 all the way to 2021. This is like 20 years worth of organic matter testing in our soil. And for our first 5 years or so, it actually went down just because the soil was so dead. We could barely get crops to germinate for our cover crops. But then we stuck with it, and then it's risen and it's continuing to rise. And despite that, the total amount of carbon here probably wouldn't be that much for a carbon credit if we got money for it. But we feel this shows that we are practicing regenerative or restoration agriculture. We've taken land that had been degraded through farming over 170 years, and we've actually improved the amount of organic matter in it. So that's kind of what regenerative means, is to build it back up. So we're trying to build a business too that is a viable business model. And build a social memory into it. The fermenting, it's a craft. So you can't just necessarily turn it over to somebody. And then combining it with growing what you want to grow to go into the kitchen, and timing and varieties. And so we want it to become a viable business model. Marketing is kind of what we need the most in right now. We've figured out how to grow stuff, how to make stuff. We've won some national recognition through the Good Food Awards, a couple of our products, so we know it's a good product. And if we can build it to something that somebody else can take over, then that's kind of a goal.
My name is Jason Hirtz, and I run Box Turtle Farm. We've been here since 2011, growing certified organic specialty greens. Because of the more extreme heat and more extreme cold, I'm going to start using more backup heat in some of my houses in the winter. Last winter we had a night of 12 below zero with 30-mile-an-hour winds, and we got through with row covers, but we did have some damage. That was a very intense period of time. Last summer was exceptionally hot, and the heat started early. I always expected to be very hot in the summer, and I just count down the days until September when it's hopefully over. But the countdown started a month early last year, and it was hard mentally and physically to look at the calendar and wait for summer to end. I plan to build another high tunnel and extend some of the houses that we have now and do more off-season production. So more production into the fall and winter, and do less production in the summer, which will be a reverse of what we've been doing. I'm typically taking off part of January and into March, and I would like to grow through that and take off in maybe the end of July and in August. A big marketing strategy for us is that I am doing reliable production week in and week out. And that would not be possible without high tunnels. It buffers the extremes outside. The wind protection that the tunnels offer is huge. The protection from extreme cold, and then being able to put shade cloth on in the summer helps a lot too, combined with the overhead irrigation. And it has really made it possible to have a predictable and reliable income. And I mean, nothing is a sure thing in agriculture. There's always going to be upsets due to weather or other natural disasters. But I know that with a really quick growing crop, we can still produce the income that we need with the space that we have and make it work. If I was going to grow this crop outdoors, I would have to cover an acre of ground. And this is a 2,400 square foot high tunnel. It uses one big sheet of plastic, but if I was doing this outdoors without this sheet of plastic, I would be driving a tractor, burning diesel fuel, using a lot more resources to produce the same crop. And even then, the success of that crop would be more variable from the weather conditions in the open field.
I'm Ryan Tenney. This is Sankara Farm, the Thomas and Car right here behind me. And we're in the Little Blue River Valley, which is the southeastern part of Kansas City, Missouri. I mean, adapting to the climate change is, I guess, it's a process of research. And also, so the agrivoltaics, kind of figuring out what the threat is, what the problem or the threat is, and then, what solutions are out there. So mycoremediation is something else that we've been learning about. We had a fire on our farm, an electrical fire that I drove around. Nothing burnt down, the structure, but stuff that was on the ground burnt up, so our irrigation burnt up. And so it set off this process of research where how do we mitigate all this plastic that burnt up in our fields. And so wine cap, mycoremediation emerged as, to borrow the term, climate smart tool technique that we could use. And we would say agroecological to describe it. So mycoremediation, again, you asked how soil speaks. And I mean, I've been speaking in terms of some of the plants, but there's a whole other kingdom of life down there, fungi, that is connecting all of the organisms in and of itself. And that one, so mycoremediation, mycofiltration, how to deal with water. We have several ponds on the farm, and we're also constructing more infrastructure for, to have more folks on the farm. So bathhouse, showers, and stewarding the land, being in relationship with the soil. We're not going to just put bleach and Dawn soap down the drain, because we have a great water system and a composting toilet. But mycofiltration is also, emerging as a research question on how to respond to climate change, and then practice, put it in there and see what happens, So we've been able to both research and implement, the researching and implementation of strategies of survival, if it is in fact an existential threat, or if not just maybe to human existence, but to planetary existence. Dead soils could be considered an existential threat. Maybe it's just like a regular season of monocropping, dead soils. That's the kind of maybe not climate smart, or not agroecological. So we're using Arduino Unos and Raspberry Pis to keep track of data on our farm in a way that's open source, like shared farmer to farmer and our community soil science cooperative. Each of our composters has a module that keeps track of temperature and humidity, but it's empowering farmers, but to produce knowledge and like produce their own tools. We go to planters, we go to the seed store, we go to the hardware store, and we can get the raw materials to produce the tool that we need on our farm. And the same is true for the technological stuff. So, we can have sensors on our both tractors, smaller tools, hand scale tools that, can make them, smarter. But it's only smarter if we know how to work it, or else, there's this kind of imbalance, knowing how to repair it and just being, alienated from the production of it. And as a farmer, we don't want to be alienated from production,
I think the biggest thing that we have seen, or I say probably the two biggest things that we've seen here with regards to climate change have been the change in temperature, especially earlier in the season, getting warmer much earlier in the season, and a lack of consistent rainfall. If I look back 10 years ago, the timing of when I would have to plant my spring brassicas, for instance, to keep them from bolting when it suddenly would get warm. I mean, we've always had that sort of pattern here in Missouri where there's a week or so in the early spring where suddenly it hits 85 degrees and then we're back down to normal spring weather. But that can cause, some disruptions as far as the brassicas are concerned. And we always had to work around that. But if I look back 10 years ago and then I look now, I can see having to progressively plant those things earlier and earlier and earlier in the spring in order to be able to get a harvest. It's, adapting to what we see as the patterns, taking good records, keeping notes of what happens every season and keeping a good journal of the temperature fluctuations, the rainfall fluctuations, the change in the timing of when we're planting things versus when they're being harvested, or if they get to harvest at all, and making those hard decisions of, do we change what it is that we're growing, when we're growing it, how we're growing it, what can we do to help sort of mitigate some of those circumstances, when it comes to using heavy layers of mulch to help protect the root zones of the plants to keep them cooler, to help trap the moisture that we do get in the soil so that we don't have to go out and try to establish these, irrigation systems, which are going to disturb the sort of natural, way that things are set up out here. Or do we start saying, okay, well, we're just not going to be able to grow that anymore. The warmer we get, we won't be able to grow that. I mean, if we get to the point now where it gets so warm that we can grow citrus fruit and avocados in West Central Missouri, I might not complain too much, but it's going to be a matter of changing as things change, because we don't have any actual control over it outside of what we do on our own farm. And the water issue too, the amount of rainfall that seems to be decreasing year after year until all of a sudden we'll have sort of a catastrophic event where it's nothing but a flood. And then, we go back into this kind of dry period, and you can sort of see those cycles starting to kind of set up and form. And I think what it really comes down to is we have to adapt. We are having to change not only when we are growing things and how we are growing things, but what we are growing. We may not be able to grow those spring brassicas for too much longer because they really won't be able to produce very, very well unless they are in some sort of a protected culture. And we may have to move to just doing those in the fall when it's consistently more cool, and growing something else instead. So I think for us, at least, it's all about adaptation. What can we grow that we are working with this sort of change that's happening? And in terms of the bottom line, when you have drought conditions and you have them more and more frequently, and it starts to affect things that are your high dollar items that are most in demand in the middle of the summer, like tomatoes, that's when it really starts to hit your bottom line. And you have to start thinking about, okay, can I no longer grow them outdoors the way that our customers want them? They want that vine ripened middle of the summer outdoor field tomato. But if I have to grow 700 plants and only get 50 pounds of tomatoes, you're going to be paying $25 a pound for those tomatoes because that's what it costs me to grow it. And is that worth it? And the answer is no. So are there systems that we can put in place that might mitigate some of that? And the answer is yes. And what do we have to do to get there?